the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m.
as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Bethany Elsey with some highlights from today's Coronation news from the GB Newsroom. A moment of history for Commonwealth and country as King Charles III is crowned the nation's monarch. The spiritual and deeply personal event for the King was watched by millions from around the world. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, placed St Edward's crown on Charles's head, making him the 40th sovereign to be crowned at Westminster Abbey.
God save the King!
God save the King!
Charles was anointed with holy oil behind a screen as the choir sang the anthem Zadok the Priest in a sacred moment shielded from public view. The King was then dressed in the vestments of the monarchy by leaders of different faiths in a coronation first. He received the symbolic glove, ring, golden orb and sceptre. Queen Camilla became the first Queen Consort to be crowned since the late Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, in 1937.
I, William, Prince of Wales, pledge my loyalty to you, and faith and truth I will bear unto you, as your liege man of life and limb. So help me God.
There was a personal moment between King and heir as the Prince of Wales, William, pledged his loyalty to his father and gave him a kiss on the cheek. The armed forces staged the largest ceremonial military operation since the late Queen's coronation in 1953. 4,000 servicemen and women took part in a parade that stretched a mile long, including the Household Cavalry, the Sovereign's Bodyguard and Royal Watermen. The military parade also featured troops from nations across the Commonwealth and the British Overseas Territories. In typical British weather, there was heavy rain, but that failed to dampen the enthusiasm of the crowds who'd gathered, hoping to catch a glimpse of the King and Queen. All procession viewing areas along the route were filled to capacity, with more than 10,000 enjoying the pomp and ceremony. Fans cheered Charles and Camilla as they travelled down the Mall back to Buckingham Palace in the Gold State coach. The carriage is over 260 years old and has been used at every coronation since 1831. We spoke to some of those fans who turned up.
Amazing, just absolutely amazing. Yeah, just congratulations to the King and Queen Camilla. Unbelievable.
Very wet, but tiring, but what a spectacle. Nobody else can do it better than us, can they?
We weren't expecting to see them on the balcony. We didn't think that we would get that close because we were quite far back. So, yeah, it's just a good day to be British.
We loved it. It was wonderful. If it wasn't so wet.
God save the King, God save the King, God save the King.
But not everyone was there in support. The Metropolitan Police have arrested 52 people. That was ahead of the coronation. The leader of anti-monarchy group Republic was among them. They had promised to stage the biggest protest against British monarch in modern history. Activists were demanding an elected head of state, saying the royal family has no place in modern democracy. A number of Just Stop Oil protesters were also arrested. Well, to round off the day of celebration, King Charles and Queen Camilla appeared together on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. They waved to the thousands who gathered to pay their respects and watch history being made. The royal family members on the balcony included Prince and Princess of Wales and their 3 children, Princess Anne and Prince Edward. Prince Harry and Andrew, the Duke of York, were not there, however. And due to the bad weather, a scaled-back fly-past of Royal Air Force jets, including the famous Red Arrows, flew over the crowds that filled the Mall and over the nation's new king. You're up to date on GB News. Now it's time for Headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, your first look at Sunday's papers. I'm Andrew Doyle, and joining me for the hour are 2 comedic heavyweights, Leo Kearse and Bruce Devlin. How are you both? Did you enjoy the coronation, Leo?
Yeah, I had it on in the background. It's quite good fun. I think I enjoyed it more than Charles did.
Well, he didn't look like he did necessarily. What, Bruce, what about you?
I actually mingled amongst the people.
There you are.
I threw myself out into the community, and the thing that really threw me, we were walking around and we didn't know where we were going, sort of thing. And I'd said to one of the volunteers, I said, "Is this the official procession route?" And they said, "For what?" I was like, OK, fine, it doesn't matter. But it was so wet.
It was.
It was very wet, and I thought, I'm not going to Hyde Park. I had on Yeezys, and they're expensive, so I didn't want to get them covered.
And they're not making them anymore.
No,
they're not, but that's a whole other thing.
Well, priorities, Bruce. Anyway, we're going to have a look before we start at the front covers, Sunday's front covers. We're going to start with the Mail. Now, obviously, there's a theme with all of these covers. The Mail is going with the look that says, "Darling, it was a triumph." The Telegraph has no words at all, actually. Souvenir edition, although that's not a headline. Big picture of Charles and Camilla there. And The Observer has a different story in addition to a photograph of Charles. They have Labour winning back swathes of Brexit voters, data reveals. Then The Sun on Sunday, just crowning glory. Sunday Express has happy and glorious. And finally, the Daily Star, keeping it real with King Chaz III. And those were your front pages. OK, let's kick off. The Observer, Leo. Now, obviously, they'll be running with the news of the coronation.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit more with The Observer today.
Yeah, they've got a picture of Charles, probably the worst picture of him, where he looks really grumpy and moody. But they've also got a story about Labour winning back swathes of Brexit voters in the local elections.
Yes.
You know, this is a story that's kind of been buried in the other papers by the coronation. But they've done analysis of keywords data that shows support for Keir Starmer's party was up by 7 points compared with 2021.
I was going to say, this was on the front cover of The Guardian yesterday, so what are they adding in this particular story? Just more close analysis, I
think they just really like talking about it.
They're just rubbing it in.
They love getting the boot into the Tories. And, I mean, the Tories have lost 1,000 seats. Yeah. It has been, you know, a pretty much as bad as it could possibly be. Yeah. And it's, you know, to a certain extent, it's not fair on Rishi, who's a pretty competent Prime Minister after, the sort of mayhem of Boris and then Truss.
Bruce.
Yeah, no, because I saw him being interviewed and they said, but these are all to do with policies that, you know, you've made decisions, your government, you know, this is under your government. But you're right. I mean, if that's the caretaker monarch, he's the caretaker Prime Minister?
Yes.
Because he's not responsible for tanking the economy in the way that...
Well, I mean, they've had so many. It's been a real revolving door parliament, hasn't it?
They've had, what, 4? Is it 4? 3?
You lose count, don't you?
Well, exactly.
Yeah. Well, the thing about this is, though, I mean, this article in particular is talking about how they've won back the Brexit voters.
Yeah.
Right? Now, we know that 70% of Labour constituencies voted leave, and then you had a Labour Party that was running on a manifesto to ignore that vote and have what they called a people's referendum.
Yeah.
And crucially, Keir Starmer was the architect of that. So if it is the case that they've sort of rebuilt the Red Wall and sort of, you know, lured back the Brexit-voting Labour constituents.
Yeah.
That is quite an achievement. I mean, whichever way you vote, you've got to admit that that's quite an achievement.
But I think there's always going to be, because the pendulum swung so far, and these traditionally, I mean, for decades, these areas voted Labour. They were thought, that's why Labour just ignored them and let, you know, things like grooming gangs happen, didn't intervene, didn't do anything about, you know, to actually look after the voters, and they became disillusioned. And then, you know, Boris and UKIP and other people could swoop in and be like, well, we'll listen to your concerns and we'll do something about it.
It wasn't
and then,
just that.
then unfortunately, they didn't really do anything there. They had this levelling up plan, but, you know, I'm not sure how much has actually been done.
The levelling up plan, no, and they were going to sort of industrialise and sort of build up the infrastructure of the north. It didn't really happen, did it?
Yeah.
But I think Brexit is really, really key here, actually, because, you know, you say that traditionally they've had these core voters within these industrial heartlands.
Yeah.
But traditionally, the left has always been anti-EU, and traditionally Labour has always been anti-EU. It's only very relatively recently they started deciding to have a love affair with the EU. So, you know, that is relevant, I think.
Well, yeah, the left, I mean, certainly the old Labour Party, the traditional Labour Party, were against EU and against mass immigration because, you know, it impacts on the workers that they represent. So you get much more competition for jobs and also more competition for services and housing and things.
Bruce, do you think Keir Starmer will make a great Prime Minister? He's not the most charismatic, is he?
He's not particularly charismatic, but it's funny because I always think if you look at the council elections ahead of a big election, it's a bit like when you watch the BAFTAs and then you go into the Oscars, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
So I think it just shows, I think there is an appetite for change. I'm not sure what kind of Prime Minister he would make because I'm not kind of sure what leader of the party he makes.
No, but on the other hand, these results are sort of suggesting that it's a shoe-in now, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's inevitable at this point. OK, we're going to move on to the Sunday Express now, and apparently, Bruce, something happened today, quite important.
It's all it has here. You got loads of stuff to say. I'm left with the fashion aspect. It just says happy and glorious, and he looks anything but.
Well, no, he looks quite happy on that
Do you think
one.
he does?
Well, I mean, on the Observer picture, he looked absolutely miserable, but there he looks actually happy.
Yeah, this is the best you're going to get in terms of a smile from Charles, I think.
Well, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because, you know, you have to take it seriously. If you smile, it might look like you're being sarcastic about the whole affair. Because, let's face it, he doesn't normally dress like that, does he? And he must find it slightly amusing.
You think he's normally slouching about in a sort of TK Maxx
tracksuit,
leisure suit,
shell suit?
I think it will be TK Maxx. I think it'll be Nicole Farley and it'll be linen, sort of thing. But then there are a whole load of people, because you've had so many people going, not my king and all this kind of stuff. If they want to be a modern and progressive monarchy, do you think that this should have been slimmed down and less ostentatious, or was that never going to be an option?
But I think a lot of people want the ostentation, don't they? I mean, I think certainly the people watching around the globe, they love the pomp.
Yeah.
Like, we forget about that, but it's really an appeal.
I don't understand what the money was spent on. I mean, because surely they're not paying to rent Westminster Abbey. Surely the state owns that or whatever. So, and all these people, I'm sure they gave their time for free. Archbishop, he's not going to send an invoice for anointing.
Well, I don't know their personal arrangements.
So,
you know?
I mean, what was the money? There's some police, there's some, you know, some barriers.
I think the security will be the major cost, sure.
Right.
How much did it come in at?
I don't know the figure.
It was like was it 250 million or 150 million? It was loads. It was loads anyway.
Well, I tell you what. Staying on this theme, let's move on to the eye now, and this is about the right to protest. And this does relate, of course, to what we were just talking about, the protesters that were there. A number of people got arrested before they'd begun their protest. So there's been a lot of chat about this. Leo, do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, so this says the right to protest in the UK is under threat after Coronation arrests, according to human rights groups. So they rushed through anti-protest laws and also sent out letters to people in advance, you know, people suspected, you know, Republicans, people like that, and also set up facial recognition cameras. So they took this incredibly seriously, much more seriously than Just Stop Oil or somebody like that actually impacts regular working people, which, you know, usually the police assist them. So, but this is worrying. I mean, the human rights groups are saying it's like Moscow, not London. I mean, it's not quite. They weren't like dragged away and beaten to death in a cell somewhere.
No.
So, you know, they will come out. But it is slightly worrying.
There are two things that concern me. Rushing through legislation is never good anyway because you don't have time to scrutinise it.
Yeah.
I particularly worry when it comes to the right to protest, which I think is the hallmark of a healthy democracy. They've done this before, you know, with their police crime and sentencing bill, which they pushed through, and that is also particularly draconian. But, Bruce, the idea of being arrested before you've even done something, when you're not posed... Surely, even however passionately people might be about the monarchy, people have the right to protest against the monarchy, surely, if
No,
they are...
no, I completely agree with you. And the thing is, as well, you don't know what the protest was going to be, because obviously they never got to do it, if you see what I mean. So
yes.
a lot of them, I think, would just want to walk around with the placards and all that kind of thing.
It's a dangerous precedent, isn't it?
think,
Because this could apply to anyone's view about anything. You know?
And it would have made the footage more interesting as well. If there'd been, a few scuffles breaking out, people running, maybe somebody streaking, that would have made it just a bit more entertaining for people who aren't...
anymore.
Yeah, nobody streaks.
The
Is it
last
too
time
cold?
was on the...
You think with climate change, people would be doing it more?
This morning weather map, remember?
Yeah.
With that man, Fred Talbot.
So
I didn't know that went out with Jimmy from Brookside, but,
So you're just thinking of the entertainment value here, a bit of protest.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the sort of civil liberties aspect. Where
I guess there's that as well.
I'm taking it a whole lot more seriously than you, Leo.
I want the law to be applied fairly. So I don't want the police to, crack down on anti-monarchy protesters and then just to help, escort Just Stop Oil protesters. It's like treat all protesters the same.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
OK, well, let's move on now. We've got time for one more story. On to The Telegraph. Prince Andrew's reception at the coronation went about as well as you'd expect. Leo?
Yeah, so Prince Andrew was booed by parts of the coronation crowd. He was booed as he was driven down the mall in a state car ahead of the coronation service. And he was dressed in ceremonial robes. So he's been removed from royal duties, but he's still got the clothes. He got to keep the uniform.
Oh, that's something.
It looked very warm, so it's just as well he can't sweat, I guess.
Did Harry get booed?
I don't know.
I saw in the actual ceremony they'd hidden Harry behind that feathered hat that one of the other royals was wearing. That was very strategic. I thought that was a great idea, actually. So he was there, but not really.
So it looked like the feather of a ginger fringe.
Oh, was that one of Andrew's children?
I don't know.
Because they're prone to wearing dodgy hats to public functions.
That's right.
Oh, I didn't see who was wearing the hat.
Right, OK, it was just a hat.
It was just a hat.
Maybe it was AI.
Maybe. But so that's a shame for obviously for Prince Andrew getting booed there.
Yeah. And not everybody's been happy about the whole thing. Some of the tweets. Dr. Charlotte Proudman tweeted a picture saying, "Oh, this is male chauvinist supremacy or whatever."
What, the coronation?
The coronation. It's like, yeah, maybe we should change the law to allow female kings. I mean, it's been what, like a few months since we had one for 50 years.
She must have missed that.
She must have missed the Queen.
The Queen being on the throne for decades.
Yeah, maybe that was a feminist.
Yeah, she wasn't paying much attention. But anyway, OK, well, that's it for part one. But in part two, we'll find out just how long that pesky COVID can be and how much trouble some very naughty Scots are in. Not these two, the SNP. See you in a minute.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Sunday's newspapers. I'm your host, Andrew Doyle. Joining me tonight, none other than the pun man himself, Leo Kearse, and Juicy Brucey Devlin. That's the name he uses at the weekend. Anyway, now, it's the Sunday Telegraph next. The story of a royal who had a great time on an island, shockingly not owned by Epstein. What's the story there, Bruce?
So this is a place called, I think, Vanuatu.
Vanuatu.
And they were obsessed with Prince Philip. So much so that when he died, they were very, very saddened. And they had marked the occasion with a ritual of wailing, crying, and drinking a mildly narcotic drink, cava, spelt with a K.
No, not cava, like...
Not like cava, not like a Spanish cava. Maybe this is something you get out of Poundland or something. Yeah, that kind of thing.
But they...
Or a little snide version.
Didn't they think he was a god or a deity of some kind, some kind of supernatural...
I always thought that everyone thought he was a lizard. So it was really interesting to hear that they thought... No, genuinely. I mean, I'd never met the man, obviously, but...
I think we can conclude he's not a lizard.
Well, he's not anything now. He's just a footnote in history.
But wait a minute. So this is an island where they effectively worshipped Prince Philip.
Yeah.
So they have been particularly celebratory when it comes to King Charles. Well, that seems fair enough.
Yeah, and it's great. It's interesting in, some Pacific islands and stuff, there's the cargo cults.
Yes.
So during the Second World War, American troops, they needed the islands for airstrips and things like that so they could go and bomb, Japan or whatever.
Yes.
So they came in and they gave all the local tribesmen, like, cans of Spam. And
yes.
The tribesmen were like, this stuff's amazing. And then when the war finished, they left, but the tribesmen wanted these people, these sky gods, to come back with their big machines. So they made, like, simulacrums of airstrips and control towers. And
yes, I've read about this.
And and airplanes and stuff to try and summon them back to get more spam.
And was this a similar thing with Prince Philip, that they
possibly
he turned up with all these materials? They thought he was a god.
I think instead of spam, he gave them racial epithets.
Is that what he did? God love him. OK, well, there we go. That's very interesting. So we're going to move on to the Sunday Times now. And some benefits to COVID, Bruce, is that right?
Well, I think that is a pun, isn't it? So what they're saying is there's now an army of long-term sick post-COVID and the pandemic, and it's pushing out the benefit bill. Ian Duncan Smith, who was the architect of universal credit, blamed ministers for failing to restore strict rules on claimants after they were relaxed during the pandemic. So an extra 224,000 working-age people are expected to claim disability benefits each year, pushing the total to 3.7. So by 27-28, the year 2027-28, the cost for benefits will go from 100.6 billion to 125.7 billion.
Another major cost of COVID happens, Leo.
Yeah, and I mean, it's totally reversible. All we need to do is cut taxes so that there's more. Like, at the moment, taxes are going up so much, benefits are going up, so the gap between the two, you might as well get yourself signed off, especially since you don't even need to go to the doctor now to get yourself signed off. They do it over Zoom, and they don't care. They're phoning it in.
You are a big fan of Trussonomics, aren't you?
I'm a massive fan of tax cuts. I think it's the greatest thing you can do for people is give them their money to spend on what they want instead of telling them, no, what you want to do with your money is spend it on this stupid bridge to nowhere or whatever it is.
Yeah, OK.
So, sorry, people are Zooming with their doctor?
Yeah, so the NHS is trying to move away from face-to-face appointments.
It's actually true, it's very true.
What will the receptionists do? I don't know what your experience of doctors' receptionists. I find them quite vicious and authoritarian. And I think it's because a lot of them are on diets and surviving only on Rivita. And I think that's why they're so crabby.
Always in that drawer.
Yeah. I once handed in, I don't know if I should say this actually, but it was a stool sample and it nearly went over some muffins. And we did have a laugh about that. And I said, oh, look, the chocolate. Ah! That did happen. But, yeah.
It's a lovely anecdote from Bruce there. We're going to move on now to the Sunday Times. This is one for Leo, I think.
So Britain's FBI have been called in to help with the SNP finance probe. This is the National Crime Agency. So Police Scotland have been investigating reports of fraud over £600,000 of donations.
This is them digging up the garden of Nicola Sturgeon.
Yeah. So they're saying there are apparently allegations that the money was spent instead of spending on an independence referendum that didn't happen. There wasn't an Indie Ref 2. The SNP spent it on other things such as wheelbarrows, I think razors and a motorhome. I don't know what they're going to do
These
with
things
all
are
necessary for a political party. So now the Police Scotland have brought in the big guns, the National Crime Agency, to help out. So they're saying there's no suggestion that Police Scotland has made mistakes in handling the case, but the National Crime Agency are experts in this. And also, they'll be less subject to any interference or any collusion from the SNP.
It doesn't look good because, I mean, a lot of people speculating that Nicola Sturgeon stepped down because she knew that there were these investigations coming up and all of this kind of thing. Bruce, it doesn't look good, does it, for the party?
It doesn't look good, and I didn't realise it was a woman's razor and just the one that they'd spent the money on, which you kind of think that couldn't have really cost that much, but, that's...
Depends how hairy the woman is.
Yeah.
Well, that's true, actually.
I think that would do one shin.
But then, I suppose the people that are pro-SNP or whatever, they're probably thinking, or like you see it on Twitter and all that kind of stuff, where is the investigation into someone like Michelle Mone? Where is that happening? And I think they feel that the SNP are being unfairly targeted. But if the SNP have financial impropriety, and it's alleged there's been a £2.2 billion underspend or something.
Yeah, where's that money in the COVID relief grants? Like, where's that money? That's unaccounted for. So I think, they need to get
I might be wrong with that figure.
I take your point, Bruce, that, there's a sense of double standards, that there's a bit too much attention being put onto the SNP about this. But like you say, we do have to know what happened. Transparency is quite important when it comes to this.
Yeah, and we do also need to know, what's happening with Michelle Mone and all the other PPE and COVID procurement shambles. But some of the SNP people are hitting back against the police, saying the investigation is a grotesque circus. He's willing to gamble. This is the Murray Foote, the SNP's former spin doctor. He's willing to gamble that no charges would be brought. MSP James Dornan says, seriously, who was in charge of this fiasco? Who ordered it to happen? And when we find out that nothing untoward happened, who will be held accountable?
So what do they want the police to do? Say, oh, well, there's probably nothing untoward, so we'll just not bother investigating.
Exactly.
What are they meant to do?
But can I ask a question? What were they looking for in the garden? I mean, is that where, and I'm not being facetious here, is that where the wheelbarrow came in? Were they hiding gardening equipment that they'd bought in these tents?
I'm not entirely sure. I don't
think anyone knows.
Yeah, there could have been a shortbread tin stuffed with 50 pences. It could be anything.
50 pence?
It could be anything.
That's oddly specific.
It's Scotland.
We don't know. It could be Lord Lucan. We don't know what was there.
Exactly. Screaming Lord Such.
OK, that's all for part 2, but coming up, we'll be tackling the existential threat of AI, the existential threat of Joe Biden, and hashtag MeToo returns. See you in 2.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Andrew Doyle. Your first look at Sunday's newspapers. And is AI more dangerous than climate change, Bruce?
Well, according to Geoffrey Hinton, known as the godfather of AI, who resigned from Google earlier this year to speak freely, should get one on a Sunday, about the risks posed by increasingly intelligent machines. Mr. Hinton, 75, has now warned that AI poses a more immediate threat to humanity than the risk of global warming.
Now, he's not playing down global warming. He's not saying global warming isn't a problem. He's just saying that killer robots are maybe more.
Yeah, listen, I have to say, and maybe I'm a bit of a layman here, if we're making these things, how can they kill us, if you see what I mean? I was watching Question Time the other day, and some farming woman, I don't know if she was a farmer, but she'd said that, you know, you can't have a robot picking strawberries because they don't have the dexterity.
Yeah. Yes.
So I'm not really worried.
OK, well, Bruce, have you seen the scene in RoboCop where they bring in the Ed 209 to the conference room and it machine guns one of the businessmen to death? That would be that's the film you should watch to understand this situation.
Yeah, but there's a couple of things. So we know where the robot is plugged in. So we can unplug it. And also the other thing is robots can't tell which box contains a traffic light. So
right. Can I just say, Leo, the issue here is that AI is machines learning, right? And so the point that, and actually Bill Gates has made the same point, that the problem is that if we set all these rules when we program them, but what if the machines can learn, then they can learn to override the rules that they don't particularly like, such as the Prime Directive, do not harm human beings.
So they'll never need to know what a traffic light looks like?
I mean, I think the traffic light thing is a slight digression from the real issue of existential death of all humankind.
I just think you could stop the Terminator if you just had a laptop screen with that on it.
Bruce, you look confused.
No, I am. Honestly, I don't understand it, and I'm sure I've been asked about it on here before. And my thing was then, are people scared about those automatic hoovers?
Yeah.
I am, because I've tripped over one of those things.
Do they work?
Well, they scurry around the place cleaning things up, but
like
then you can stub your toe. They're not without risk.
They're not without risk, no, but I mean, you're not worried that a hoover's going to kill you.
Why not?
Fair
you
enough.
don't know if it learns how to use a samurai sword.
If it's a possessed Henry.
Right.
Or Hetty.
Well, yeah.
Drones are taking over on the battlefield in Ukraine.
Are they? What about driverless cars? Is that AI?
Yeah, well, there's a scene in Total Recall with a driverless car that tries to kill its occupant. So I'm just saying that if you watch the films that I watch, you would have this similar level of terror.
I only like films that I've seen before, which I know throws up when did you see them, but, you know, I like what I like.
Fair enough. We're going to move on to the next story now. This is the Sunday Telegraph, and Joe Biden says that Joe Biden is a very knowledgeable person and that one day he hopes to meet him.
Yeah,
Leo.
Speaking of things that could kill everybody, Joe Biden claims to know more than the vast majority of people in defence of his old age. He says if he wins the election, he'll be sworn in at the age of 82, and at the end of his second term, he'll be closer to 90 than he is to 80. And 80 is already old.
Well, Americans love their elderly statesmen, don't they? But, you know, there's a point to what Joe Biden's saying, is that old people do have a lot of wisdom. They've got a lot of collected knowledge, haven't they?
Some old people. I don't think Joe Biden is so much in this category, because I've seen him and he seems to have a lot of trouble finding where the door is to leave a room or to walk off stage, or even to say words that make sense.
There is an issue. It's not to do with age, actually. It's just to do with the fact that he can't seem to string a sentence together. I mean, that is a worry, isn't it, Bruce?
Well, it is. And I'd watched, it was an interview with Donald Trump. And
who's no spring chicken either.
Who's no spring chicken either. But he said that he was in Louisiana asleep. So, I mean, was he? I've no idea.
Is it not a slight worry, you know, when you have a world leader who appears to have some kind of cognitive decline, but the White House won't admit it, right? You know, if they admitted it, then we'd all be really... You know, I'd feel a lot of pity for the man, but the fact that it's been denied and denied and denied... And also, doesn't this mean that if the Republicans actually put someone up like Ron DeSantis, who's younger, who is far more quick on his feet, far more witty, I mean, he'd wipe the floor with him.
But there's nobody to replace Joe Biden. I mean, Kamala Harris, the vice president, is even more unpopular than Joe Biden, so, you know, she doesn't have a shot at the title.
That's a broader question, is it? Why can't the Democrats produce a candidate? A candidate who is popular, more popular than Kamala Harris.
I think it's because left-wing people are inherently a bit rubbish.
That's quite a partisan view there, Leo, which I do take issue with. Anyway, we're going to move on to the Times now. This is, it turns out, a sex show for children wasn't a good idea.
Yeah, I didn't think this was real, so I'd done a bit of Googling, but so the School of Sexuality Education was consulted for the Family Sex Show.
Right? I should say the Family Sex Show was a show that we covered on this channel a number of months ago, because it was to tour, and then there were complaints, you know, and then it got cancelled. But this article is saying that it was actually, it was advised by the School of Sexuality Education. So is that what they're saying? Is that the nature of this story?
Well, what they're saying... So the Family Sex Show was billed as, wait for it, a fun and silly performance about the painfully awkward subject of sex. It was directed at family audiences and children as young as 5, which I genuinely find that really hard to believe. Honestly, I do. With a warning that it contained nudity, but was cancelled last year after a backlash from parents. There were songs. Emma Chan, the charity's reproductive and sexual health lead, has a personal blog that includes videos of herself singing a song called Let's All Masturbate.
Yeah, and it sounds made up, but it was true. What I'm interested in, why is it coming back in the news, Leo? Because we covered this a long time ago.
So it's coming back, I think, just to remind us how insane humanity can be.
Well, there's that.
These people who are obviously highly educated, intelligent people run this theatre group and can think that it's a good idea to get people naked in front of children.
But the news is that the company had sought advice from a group.
The news is they'd sought advice from educators. So you know, there's some sort of state involvement. This isn't just some crazy arts group. This is, you know, they had. But it just shows how our education system has been completely captured by just the mad gender ideology.
Leo, you've made this point before, that there's been this sort of move in sort of theatre and live performance to sort of protect and coddle adults and say we need to put trigger warnings on everything, and you know, you should be warned about the dangers of this. But when it comes to children, we're doing the opposite, which is just let them all in, whatever, they should see whatever they want. And what's going on?
Their justification for it is that children are being exposed to porn at younger ages. And I've no doubt that it's, you know...
5-year-olds, though.
Yeah, but 5-year-olds, I mean, no 5-year-old's got a phone. That's ridiculous.
I don't think this is a left-right issue. I think everyone can sort of agree that this sort of stuff isn't appropriate for 5-year-olds.
Yeah, no, completely. That's the whole thing. I mean, teach kids at an appropriate age about relationships and what they need to know in an appropriate manner. But no, if the kids are as young as 5, there's something off.
And also anybody who's, you know, a paedophile, in the old days, people always say, oh, the church had so many paedophiles or whatever. It's like, yeah, because the church gave them access to kids in a position of authority. Now, paedophiles would, I'm sure the people behind the Family Sex Show had perfectly benign intentions, but if a paedophile was to want to expose himself to children, this would be where he'd go.
OK, right, well, we're going to move on now to the Sunday Times again, and we're looking for soldiers to fill our gaps. Leo.
Yeah, so schools are looking to soldiers to fill teaching gaps. Soldiers seem to be able to do anything. Like, any time there's people go on strike in the NHS, like bin collection, soldiers can do absolutely anything.
But there's something in there. I mean, there's a really rough school in South London, and they had a military guy come in to kind of like be the disciplinarian.
Right.
So if ever the kids mucked about in class, he would turn up
with an AR-15.
I don't think he actually shot the children, but I think he intimidated them with his brusque nature.
Right, yeah, maybe just a jab with a bayonet. But yeah, apparently a lot of schools are having trouble getting staff. So 3/4 of schools said trainee teacher applications had fallen this year, and for some the numbers have halved.
Kind of makes sense though, doesn't it, Bruce? Because, you know, in a world where it is harder for teachers to discipline kids, because it seems that they've got all the power, you know, they could just complain about you and you get suspended or whatever. You know, and there's no sort of respect for authority. Bring in a military guy, right?
Oh, yeah, because that'll tell them. But then they won't like that and they'll start crying and then they'll moan about it. But no, I agree with you. It was the same during lockdown, and whether this is a popular thing to say or not. If they wanted everyone to stay in, we should have had people shooting at people's feet. There, I've said it.
Yep, okay.
And I'm not pro-gun.
Not pro-gun at all, but no. You think people should shoot at other people's feet?
No, I did. You know, when people were like breaking lockdown news and everything, because you were like, I'm stuck. No, come on. Other countries did it, where they would like...
Just a few snipers here and there would have solved that issue.
I think that's okay.
I think that's fair enough. OK, we're going to move on to one more story in this section. This is a throwback to Me Too. Me Too back in the headlines.
Yes, Ruth Wilson, who she played Alice, somebody or other in Luther. I remember her from a show called Suburban Shootout from many years ago. She's basically said Hollywood was totally hypocritical with the Me Too movement. She also said the pressure on female actresses or actors to have cosmetic surgery, labelling Botox treatments as mad. What I would like to point out about this is, I remember Courtney Love being interviewed on something, and what she said was, all those years ago, if Harvey Weinstein asks you to a private meeting in the Four Seasons, and I think you can quote me on that, don't go.
Right.
So, I'm sure they must have known.
You think a lot of people knew in the way that a lot of people at the BBC knew?
I would have gone. I think that's the way...
Would you have gone to Harvey's suite?
That's the way I'm discriminated against in show business. I never got that invitation to Harvey's suite. I would have been there in a second. You know what I mean? I'd be a Hollywood star right now. But because I'm a man, I don't get that invite.
I mean, she's also talking about the nature of the way that women are expected to sort of preserve their looks later. She's talking about deep-seated misogyny in Hollywood, basically.
Well,
I mean, there's a point there, isn't
basically, they want you to look good. I mean, that's obvious. I mean, you're an actress. If you don't want to be based on your looks, don't do something that's completely based on your looks.
Isn't that discriminatory against, you know, complete mingers? You know, who should be able to act as well. Why don't we have more roles for them?
Well, they can become brain surgeons and things where your looks don't matter.
But the funny thing is, I saw a photo of Meg Ryan recently, and she has gone a similar route to Madonna and which is totally her choice, by the way, but unrecognisable.
Right.
That sort of thing. But then my point would be, and maybe I'm wrong about this as well, you kind of knew what you were getting into, and you knew the money was better than working in Tesco's.
Yeah.
And you kind of knew what went with it. Now, I'm not saying any of it's right, or whatever, but to be surprised that, you know, people have been, like, back in the day before it was plastic, they were taping their faces.
Yeah.
And, you know, sleeping...
It's always been quite a superficial industry.
Yeah.
I mean, that, I think, is a fair point.
The thing with acting is anybody can do it because it's dead easy, and everybody wants to do it because you get millions of pounds if you make it into Hollywood. So that's how, you know, people like Harvey Weinstein can exploit that and force people to sleep with them. You don't get that in industries where there's actually some talent involved.
You never got that in Take the High Road.
Yeah.
There was no complaints up there, and I think they all had very natural-looking faces, some of which could stop trains.
OK, that's it for part 3. But coming up in the final section, we've got sausage fingers, NHS hypnosis, and athletic women in flattering outfits. So, something for everyone. Stay tuned.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Sunday's newspapers. We jump back in with the Daily Star, some sexy Spanish sporty sirens signal sexism. That's what they wrote. What's going on there, Leo?
So this is the Madrid Open is caught up in a sexism storm over ball girl outfits, and they face a formal complaint. Do we have a picture? I'll Google it later when I'm in bed. No, but so basically the ball girls. Well, actually, I hope they're old enough.
I think they're adults.
Otherwise, that's going to sound really sinister. What I just said.
I think they're adults.
They're all over 40, but they've been wearing crop tops, pleated skirts, and socks, and they've had all-girl crews on the centre court. So some people, the feminist critics, are saying it's a form of sexist violence because the ball boys just wear shorts and stuff like that.
So you could say double standards. I think violence is quite an extreme way of describing it.
I guess they could say it creates an environment in which, people might say tweet something, and when they say a tweet is words, and words are violence, so it's violence.
OK, Bruce, what do you think about this? Do you think there is a double standards in how people are dressing the ball boys and the boy girls?
Well, first of all, have the girls been consulted, and are they unhappy with the uniforms that they've been given? Because I haven't read that anyway.
It doesn't say that, does it?
So I don't understand that. And my thinking is in Wimbledon or the Davis Cup or whatever, do they not all wear the same thing? The boys and the girls.
They do,
similar...
don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, that's
the boys are wearing shorts, whereas the girls wear these sort of pleated skirts. Not that I've been looking, but they wear, so it is a bit more revealing and a bit, But
you make an interesting point, Bruce, about, do the people that this affects care about this particularly? But you remember what happened with the grid girls and the darts girls? Yeah.
Well, I was about to mention that.
Because no one asked them. And I remember seeing a feminist on an early morning show berating this young woman who just lost her job. Yeah. And this woman was saying, but I wear what I want to wear and I like wearing dresses.
But it was really important, so then feminists could go to the darts and enjoy it.
Yes, because they always felt excluded from the darts.
Yeah.
No, it was just the way to say, because I remember that debate about the good girls. And I remember Naomi Campbell on GMTV or something going, I think it's a real shame because they're representing the country and, you know, you can earn a really good living from doing it. And you're not being forced into anything. That's your choice.
There was a class issue as well, wasn't there? Because a lot of the people complaining were middle class. A lot of the girls who were fired were working class. It was almost like, you know, there was something dodgy going on there as well. But anyway, that's a separate issue. We're going to go on to the Telegraph next. And a council have removed a troubling portrait. Bruce, you often delete pictures out of shame?
I don't take pictures, so I don't have that sort of thing. So, no, I think that's very wise. Because I know people that have been caught out. I don't know how to pronounce this man's surname. Do you?
Joseph Marriott.
Marriott, right, OK. So he's the former MP for Horsham, and he was opposed to the abolition of the slave trade and slavery throughout his career and retained financial interests in the Caribbean.
We should say he did live in the 1800s.
Yes,
that's an important
it's not
context.
A recent thing. Sorry, I maybe should have led with that.
It's not like 5 years ago.
No. But they've taken his portrait down and they put it in a plate, the storage, because they don't know what to do with it, because they feel, in wake of things such as Coulson and Bristol, Black Lives Matters and all that kind of stuff, that it's offensive, which, but
well, slavery's offensive, but people who lived hundreds of years ago supporting slavery, that's not offensive because everyone did.
Yeah.
And they're dead.
And they're long dead.
Yeah, and there's slavery. There's more slavery in the world now than there was at the height of the transatlantic slave trade, but nobody seems to be interested in doing anything about it.
It's much cheaper to hide a painting than actually go out there and deal with the issues of slavery in the real world.
But a lot of the kids that are tweeting, they're making lists of statues and paintings and things like that to be taken down and questioned. It's quite Orwellian. But the technology they're using to make those lists is probably manufactured by Uyghur slaves in China.
Well, there's that. But also the people they've put on their hit list of statues that have to go down. And we've had Abraham Lincoln. I think he was involved with freeing a few slaves, wasn't he? If my history serves me right. They've even gone after the bust of Thomas Henry Huxley, who was a slavery abolitionist. Because his attitudes weren't quite right. What is going on, Bruce? I mean, like...
But then the renaming streets, or there is a consultation in Edinburgh where they're renaming streets, Dundas Street, but I don't know if anything has happened about it.
Why are they renaming that street?
I don't know, but apparently Edinburgh is now the European capital for potholes. I didn't know that. Someone told me that.
It's not like the street is called Slavery is Great Street. You know, I mean, they don't... I get that, but it's like they're changing names and sort of designations that are historically... You know, they're to do with history.
Yeah.
And they don't realise that people understand that ethical trends shift over time, you know?
And also a lot of the slave traders that paid for things like Coulson and stuff, these people bequeathed huge amounts of money to universities or to build orphanages or hospitals or whatever. So are the hospitals going to pay reparations?
It's quite funny. The one in Oxford University, it was at Oriel College. It was at the Rhodes Must Fall campaign. It's a statue of Cecil Rhodes, who, by our standards, had very dodgy views. They wanted to tear it down, but the leader of that campaign was on a Rhodes Scholarship. So he was getting over 20 grand from the very fund that he was trying to sort of denigrate in this way. It's like, well, you're not oppressed if you're getting that much money, are you?
And it's sort of sending a message to people now, like any slave owners in China or anything like that, don't do anything good with your money. Just spend it on yachts and fancy women.
Well, I think you make a very good point, Leo, about dealing with actual slavery in the world, which is a terrible, horrible thing.
Yeah.
Rather than tearing down a few statues and thinking you've done something amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, on to the Sunday Mirror now, and doctors want to put people to sleep without drugs. Maybe by making them watch one of the new Star Wars films.
Yeah, not one of the old ones, it's dead exciting, but patients should be hypnotised before surgery to slash painkiller use, according to the experts. They've done a UK trial involving children having a catheter inserted into their hearts. That sounds pretty serious to start off with the trial. But the children that listened to a nurse reading from a hypnosis script before the operation required a lower dose of sedatives. And apparently in the time leading up to an operation, you're lying, you're sort of doing nothing, you're just waiting for the surgery, and it can be a stressful time. So if you have hypnosis tapes, then it can bring your...
No, I get that. I get the sort of relaxing people through the hypnotic technique, right? But then to reduce the level of drugs, that implies that they've assumed the hypnosis has had some effect. But with a lot of people, it doesn't, does it? It's a bit of a risk.
But then they can say, is that sore? And if they're sore...
What, is this scalpel in your brain sore?
Yeah.
And OK, Bruce, I don't
I
trust...
think this is rubbish.
Yeah, right.
No, I do. I'm going to speak because I bought Paul McKenna. I can make you thin. It's not happened. And I can help you sleep. I haven't slept since the mid-80s. So maybe I'm just resistant.
Also, it just feels a bit like sham science, doesn't it? I mean, like...
Charlatans, quacks.
Yes, quacks.
They did a study. They did a trial, a UK trial.
On who?
What's the studies show? The classic words.
Well, I don't believe it. There's no way I'm going to let... If I have an operation, there's no one going to let some, like, Derren Brown come in and sort of put me to sleep.
Well, as soon as they start playing the hypnosis script, you can just say to them, like, listen, I want the full dose of morphine here.
I want to be knocked out.
Yeah.
Like, with a mallet,
I don't want to be dangled from a box in the sky while people throw up operating tools.
Right, exactly. OK, we're going to the Star now. This is a cake story. But it's not a nice cake story.
No, it's not a nice cake story. So basically, it's really disgusting. Do we have a picture of the cake?
I think we do have a picture of the cake.
Do we have
I hope
a picture
so.
of it?
This is to commemorate King Charles's coronation.
But it's done in a really snide way. So as we know, he has quite a bulbous, sausagey type finger, right? That's really just the bottom line.
Yes.
They look like a bunch of beef links from a butcher up in Scotland. That's what they look like. They're kind of red and puce.
You're not mincing your words there.
Well, no, because it's a good sausage with decent casing.
Yeah.
And this person, but it looks like a foot.
There it is.
Oh, it looks like a foot. And the ring. Oh!
Wait, this is supposed to be honouring King Charles.
No, I don't think it is meant to be honouring King Charles. I think it's...
But also, as a cake, it just doesn't look appetising. You wouldn't eat that, would you, Leo?
No, absolutely not. But don't you think it looks more like a foot? Because that's the thing as well. It's missing the small toe and it's missing a thumb.
And it's also got too much icing. Looking at that cake, straight away I can tell you that's too much. The sponge to icing ratio is way off. Fingers aren't good for that. That's why cakes are usually round or square.
Yep. Very good cake knowledge there, Leo. OK, finally, we've got time for one more story. This one is in the Sunday Mirror. A disorderly passenger voted off a flight. Sounds like your stag do.
Yeah, they've introduced democracy to defenestrating people from planes. So Frontier Airlines passenger was voted off a flight after a row broke out before the plane took off. So there's scenes circulating on social media. The ground crew is seen escorting one of the women and a man who's her partner off the plane. But then a fellow traveller is shown calling for the other passengers to vote on whether the second woman involved in the argument should also be removed, because apparently she'd been involved in an altercation with another passenger.
Is that how this is going to work then from now on?
So so they removed everybody. They voted and everybody was like, yeah, no, throw her off as well, which is great. I think we should.
Bruce, final comment?
Who started the vote? I take it wasn't a Ryanair flight.
Just some busy guy, some busybody wanted to introduce democracy.
OK, well, that is all we've got time for, I'm afraid. The show is nearly over. So let's have another quick look at Sunday's front pages. As you can imagine, the coronation is dominating. The Daily Mail are going with the look that says, "Darling, it was a triumph." The Telegraph hasn't got any words, but it does go with a big picture of King Charles and Queen Camilla. The Observer has Labour winning back swathes of Brexit voters, data reveals. The Sun on Sunday, crowning glory. The Sunday Express has happy and glorious, and the Daily Star goes with King Chas III. That's all for tonight, but thank you to my guests, Leo and Bruce. Tomorrow, Steve N. Allen is hosting, so make sure you tune in at 11 o'clock. And if you're watching the 5 a.m. repeat at the moment, then please stay tuned for breakfast. Farewell. See you later.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, lovely people, and welcome. I am definitely Neil Oliver, and I am definitely live on GB News TV and on radio. Coming up on the show this evening, on this historic day for the nation, I'll be discussing UK sovereignty with the doctors Kat Lindley and Robert Malone. Who will truly reign over us when we sign up to the WHO's Pandemic Preparedness Treaty? And I'll also be joined by the lawyer Francis Hoare, who says I'm worrying about nothing because the UK will always have the final say. All of that, plus plenty chat with my brilliant panellist, Andrew Eborn. But first, an update on the latest news from Bethany Elsey.
Neil, thank you. I am Bethany Elsey with some highlights from today. A moment of history for Commonwealth and country as King Charles III is crowned the nation's monarch. As the Archbishop of Canterbury placed St Edward's crown on His Majesty's head, there were cheers of God Save the King. King Charles became the 40th monarch to be crowned at Westminster Abbey in the first coronation to be held there for 7 decades. Although he's been king for 8 months, today he truly wears the crown, following the death of his mother, the late Queen Elizabeth II, in September. During the ceremony, King Charles promised to use justice and mercy in all his judgments.
Will you solemnly promise and swear to govern the peoples of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, your other realms and the territories to any of them belonging or pertaining, according to their respective laws and customs?
I solemnly promise so to do.
Will you, to your power, cause law and justice in mercy to be executed in all your judgments?
I will.
Immediately after the king, Queen Camilla was anointed and crowned with Queen Mary's crown by the Archbishop of Canterbury. In a touching moment of the ceremony, the Prince of Wales pledged himself to his father.
I, William, Prince of Wales, pledge my loyalty to you, and faith and truth I will bear unto you, as your liege man of life and limb. So help me God.
Prince William kissed Charles on the cheek, and the king said a few words to his son. Prince Harry was seated 2 rows behind his brother in the Abbey. He was joined by his uncle Andrew, the Duke of York. Earlier, Buckingham Palace confirmed that neither would play a formal role at the event, as they're no longer working royals. Around 2,200 guests filled Westminster Abbey for the historic occasion. Alongside members of the royal family, the Prime Minister and his wife, former Prime Ministers, faith leaders and local heroes attended. Members of foreign royalty, world leaders and heads of the Commonwealth were also invited, alongside some well-known celebrities. King Charles and Queen Camilla have appeared on the balcony of Buckingham Palace to thank the thousands who gathered there to pay their respects to the new monarchs. The King and Queen were welcomed by the crowds who cheered in celebration. They were joined by the Prince and Princess of Wales and their 3 children. Princess Charlotte, seen there in the front, also waving to well-wishers. 2 of the King's siblings, Princess Anne and Prince Edward, also came out to greet supporters. Due to the weather, a scaled-back fly-past of Royal Air Force jets, including the famous Red Arrows, flew over the crowds that filled the Mall and over the nation's new king. Gun salutes have been held around the UK to mark the crowning of the King. At Horse Guards Parade in London, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery fired a 6-gun salute. In Wales, the 104th Regiment Royal Artillery performed a 21-gun salute at Cardiff Castle. At Edinburgh Castle, the 105th Regiment Royal Artillery fired a 21-gun salute, and members of the 3rd Battalion of the Royal Regiment of Scotland and instructors of the Army Cadet Force played the national anthem. And in Northern Ireland, the 206th Ulster Battery of the same regiment also fired a 21-gun salute. At Hillsborough Castle, the Fort Guard, who's been involved in every coronation event since 1660, also took part. In typical British weather, there was heavy rain, but that failed to dampen the enthusiasm of the crowds who gathered, hoping to catch a glimpse of the King and Queen. All procession viewing areas along the route were filled to capacity. Fans cheered Charles and Camilla as they travelled down the Mall in the Gold Stake coach, which is over 260 years old and has been used at every coronation since 1831. We spoke to some of the 10,000 people who turned up.
Amazing, just absolutely amazing. Yeah, just congratulations to the King and Queen Camilla. Unbelievable.
Very wet, but tiring, but what a spectacle. Nobody else can do it better than us, can they?
We weren't expecting to see them on the balcony. We didn't think that we would get that close because we were quite far back. So, yeah, it's just a good day to be British.
We loved it. It was wonderful. If it wasn't so wet.
God save the King, God save the King, God save the King.
Well, just hours before King Charles's coronation, police arrested the leader of anti-monarchy group Republic, along with a number of other protesters lining the procession route. Republic had previously promised to stage the biggest protest against a British monarch in modern history. Protesters dressed in yellow T-shirts demanded an elected head of state and said the royal family has no place in modern constitutional democracy. A number of Just Stop Oil protesters were also detained. The Met says a total of 52 arrests were made. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Today, we were invited to witness something of profound importance, a promise made, an oath taken. For those who care about the truth, an oath is no small thing. An oath is a solemn appeal to God, asking him to bear witness to a promise. But more revealing by far is how a person making a promise or taking an oath actually behaves, what they do. A person might promise in a court of law to tell the truth, on a battlefield to be steadfast to comrades until death, but the proof of the pudding lies in how the taker of the oath lives their life. It would have been easy to be distracted today by pageantry and pomp, all the music and marching. That's the name of the game on a day like today, razzle-dazzle 'em. But the heart of the matter of the coronation of King Charles III, like the grain of sand at the heart of a pearl, was a promise. The King's promise to us, the people. Charles promised and swore to govern the people of this United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland according to our laws and customs. The laws and customs in question are not the endless pages of legislation